Coffman of Double E Ranch Advocacy is back for another very informative installment of the Businessy podcast. With a few big changes in her life, Emma changed course to become an even bigger influence within the agricultural industry since her first appearance on this show. She is a full-fledged face of the operations behind where exactly your food comes from, with an education from Texas A&M University and experience of being in the field working with the people on the ranches. She tells the truth of what was going on in so many southern towns when the politicians in Washington, D.C. were telling you, the American citizens, there was no real problem. She also explains just how environmentalism can backfire when it comes to endangered species, and just what is that lab-grown mystery meat they're trying to sell you. This episode is filled with facts you are going to want to know about where your food comes from. Now, let's get to business. Hey everybody, I am your host Tatiana Ryan. This is the Businessy podcast, and I have had so many questions from people to have this person back. I love her to death. It is Emma Coffman from Double E Ranch. She knows all of the insight with the cattle industry, and so many people have so many questions about the things that have changed, especially with this new presidency also. So Emma, thank you so much for coming back, because you're a very busy girl. You have been up to so many different things right now, and you've made a lot of changes since we talked last.
We have. Well, first of all, thank you for having me back. I had a blast the first time, so I'm definitely excited to be back and then talk about some of the things that are going on in our food and fiber production. And I think that there's a lot of opportunity for consumers to get, and producers alike, to get educated and maybe get a little bit of a different insight on what's going on in our country and the world. So I'm excited.
Yeah, thank you for reiterating that things are changing very quickly, not only in our country, but also in the world, in our food processing and the cattle industry itself. We've seen it on TV, played out on shows and everything. So you've changed roles since we last spoke. What are you currently working on?
Yes, been very blessed. I think that God really makes you uncomfortable when you're not in the place that you are called to be in. And I'm one of those people that I overthink everything. And so I was not necessarily disliking my role, but I definitely didn't feel as though this is where I needed to be. And so I prayed. I was like, God, all right, if this is not where I'm supposed to be, go ahead and remove me. And that is the quickest prayer. If you ever doubt or question what's going on in your life, ask that prayer, because that will be the most aggressively answered one you could ever ask for. It was great. It was awesome. Completely out of the blue, company called and, they had major cutbacks. And so I was one of the last ones hired. So I was one of the first ones to go, and I could not have been happier. Have been really thinking about taking Double E Ranch Advocacy full time. And I was, again, in one of those positions that the job wasn't, probably where I should have been. Personal life, relationship, things like that. The whole thing just felt like you were trying to fit a square peg through a round hole. And I asked God to change it, and He did. And there have been so many blessings that have happened out of that. I took the advocacy full time, and then I had some accolades come my way to help boost my recognition within the industry, which has been amazing. So not only doing that, I'm also a part-time pilot for a agriculture drone company. So what we do is we take drones and we do spot spraying of either fertilizing or herbicides. And then I just got off the phone today, possibly including some pesticides and more animal control, pest control. And so I do that part-time. And then I've got a couple other things in the work that I'd be going back to my alma mater and possibly doing exactly what I'm doing right now with myself, but now with a steady paycheck, which is crazy to think. So yeah, it's just, I feel like my life's like that Thanksgiving plate. You only have so much to fit on there, but you just keep piling stuff up. It's like, Whatever, you don't know till you try.
Well, congratulations. And as you said, a lot of times, as so many people are feeling right now, things have to fall apart to come back together the way you really want them to. So, congratulations on that.
Thank
Now,
you.
you're still working with actual ranchers on hands-on roles and even getting into more advocacy. As you had just said, you started more of the double E advocacy.
Mhm.
What do you see taking effect with this new administration going forward?
Yeah, so there's been a lot of changes, and first of all, having Brooke Rollins now with the USDA is massive. I think that having someone who's actually pro agriculture and someone who actually is invested in agriculture, both the United States, but also not just the big guys, but the small, everyday common producer is going to be a really big advantage for us. Brooke Rollins kind of came out of left field. She was not originally the first person that we thought was going to be nominated for that position, and then her name came up, and we all kind of looked into her and her background and what she stood for, and the entire industry. And I can say NCBA was one of the big ones that said, absolutely, let's go. And so she has been absolutely incredible. I'm very excited to see what she has. Vilsack really let the American producer down. And I'm excited to see someone who is willing to pick up those pieces and weld them back together again. So we're seeing a lot of changes, and I think right now everyone in the agriculture community is a little nervous about the trade and the tariffs that are going into place. But here's what people need to understand is that the tariffs that are being set in place right now are not, at least they weren't as of 3 weeks ago. I think China decided to jerk the rug underneath us a little bit, and we did retaliate, and I think in an appropriate way. But before that, the administration was not charging a tariff $1 more than what other countries had been imposing on us. We're not the world's piggy bank. And I think that we see people's attitudes towards the United States as America, American dream, but also American money, and thinking that we're like the never ending ATM that pulling out of everybody else's accounts. That's not how that works. And I'm very excited to see that this administration is finally putting their foot down and saying enough is enough. Canada, Mexico especially, we saw that GMO corn ban little stunt that they tried to pull, and they were proven wrong multiple different times. And the way that works is when you have the United States and Mexico and Canada have a treaty and a trade agreement that if a ban was to be imposed on a certain product, it has to go through some legitimate scientific based reasoning. It's called the Mexican, United States, and Canadian Trade Agreement. That's what it's called. And so, what Mexico tried to do is try to completely ban GMO corn from imports from the United States. So, here's a couple of things. Is first of all, there's no scientific data or basis that really proves that GMO corn is bad for human or animal consumption. And I know that's probably going to tick a lot of people off. Look, you can look at that at different angles, but the fact of the matter is there's no scientific basis behind that argument that you can actually prove. And so much to the point that Mexico said, absolutely not. We're not going to let this into our country anymore. And the United States said, that's not cool because you are a number one export for corn. So that would really trash and tank the corn market here in the United States. And trying to reroute that grain would have been really expensive. And we probably would have seen a drop in that price, commodity pricing. And so what happens is when there's a disagreement like that, we have to bring a representative from the United States, representatives from Mexico, and a representative from Canada. Now, they get to choose which representative. And Canada actually pulled somebody from, I believe, if it was either Finland or the Netherlands, I can't quite remember which one it was, but they actually pulled a third party person in. And they all looked at the information. Each country gets a chance to give a proposal and say, hey, this is why I believe what I believe. And so for Mexico, it was, this is why we think corn, the GMO corn should not be allowed in. United States said, actually, this is why we think that's an invalid argument. And it went back and forth and back and forth. And a few years later, it comes to a panel The panel, and again, it is not only citizens of the countries involved, but it is also citizens of other countries as a third party expert testament, really. And they came back and said, sorry, Mexico, there is no scientific basis of your argument that is valid enough to restrict the importation of this corn. Also, what Mexico fails to remember is that we supply the majority of their corn. Native corn in Mexico it's not sustainable. That's why they're our number one imports. Not only is it close, but which keeps prices down, but it's also ample supply and for their livestock and for people's consumption as well. And I get a lot of hate in the comments when I post videos about this. And I also get a lot of hate about any kind of opposing country stance. You are poking the bear, which is fine. That's what we're here for, because facts over feelings. But the same thing when it comes to the United States and Texas and the Rio Grande and the water treaty agreement. Mexico is stealing water from the United States, and they still owe us a lot of water. And they're withholding that. And it put Texas sugarcane production out of business. There's no more sugarcane production in Texas. The last sugarcane operation and mill closed last year. And I think that's sad because you're killing off American agriculture off of an agreement that you signed your name on the dotted line on. We're all hurting for water right now, but you still owe your end of the bargain and agreement. So I'm excited to see a lot of this petty, really, to be honest with you. I think it's people and countries trying to see what they can get away with. I'm excited to see this administration come in and put their foot down on things like this.
How do you see the new tariffs affecting the agriculture sector going back and forth, as you just said, with this pettiness of, who does what and who signed what, and then going back on their word?
Yeah, so I'm on the fence with the tariffs on a personal standpoint because I do believe that the tariffs need to happen. President Trump is utilizing this tariffs as a negotiating power with multiple different areas. A lot of it is going to be immigration and crime. And already we have seen a drastic drop in not only crime, but also illegal alien related issues, not only specifically here in Texas, because that's the state I live in and that's what we talk about a lot. If you live in Colorado, you probably don't hear much of it. I don't think it's going to be as bad as people are worried about. And again, we're only imposing tariffs that match what other countries are imposing on us. And I think that, again, there's a water trough, if you think about it from an analogy standpoint, that everyone is coming to, and it's the United States holding the bucket, filling that water trough, and we're not getting any of that monetary feedback into our communities and into agriculture. So with China, they imposed a 10 to 15% tariff on our soybeans, pork, and dairy products, wheat. China's always been a big of a bully because they are a very large importer. Because you have to remember, China is they're not exactly known for their agriculture production. They are known for agricultural importation, which gives countries who are very high in agriculture production an advantage. And the problem is that you have a supply and demand, and people forget that the basic economics is fast and true. That's a hard, steady line that will never change. When China increases their tariffs, that puts a little bit of a damper on the corn, the prices, and then the also futures of the commodity prices. But again, they need to import from somewhere. Now, what we do have to keep in mind is Brazil, Australia, countries like that who do have a very good agriculture production, they do have the opportunity to go ahead and fill those shoes in that gap. But I don't think Brazil's numbers are as accurate as they state. I would tell people to just let's see how this rides out. I don't think it's going to be as detrimental that it should cause for a large concern. I'm also one of those people that putting tariffs, it is a political move to try to gain leverage. And again, our country is tired of being bullied around by others. And so I'm excited that Trump is actually standing up for our country, but I also want to see how Trump plans to implement the futuristic or the futures of our agriculture productions, because we haven't really seen a plan come out of Trump. Brooke Rollins, great. I know RFK Jr. is a big topic of conversation, but really Trump himself, we haven't seen a fast and steady, hardcore plan. He walked into a mess. I'm personally being patient with his agenda and what he's trying to accomplish. He is doing, I mean, just historical changes in our country, and all for the better from so far what I've seen. Now, the tariffs, I think that's an uncomfortable current situation to get a much better long-term solution. So I would tell people just to chill out. When I talk to Cattle Max or Cattle Facts and other commodity experts, I ask them about this. They're not really concerned. And until they start really voicing their concern, I'm not really going to be freaking out. The fact of the matter is, we don't really know what's going to happen. It's always one of those wait and see type of situations.
Being in Texas, being on the ground with all the ranchers, you brought up crime. Crime was a huge one. And a lot of the country doesn't understand what the Texans were going through with the cartels coming through ranches, doing what they were doing. Can you expand on that and kind of explain what you guys were going through?
Absolutely. It's really unfortunate. Again, like you said, I'm very boots on the ground. My whole advocacy is very grassroots. And then, of course, I consult and I do a little bit of day working here and there with these producers. So I'm seeing the cattle, I'm seeing their operations. What people don't understand is that it's not just a southern border issue. That southern border issue bleeds into the rest of Texas and into the rest of the United States as well. We saw that with the Venezuela issue, gang issue in Colorado. The same thing has been going on for ever here in Texas. And it's not a joke. And I'm very disappointed that our former administration treated it as though it wasn't an issue. And this open invitation to let these people into our country. And the problem is that the people who are coming in illegally are not the people who are exactly upstanding citizens. And there's a reason that they're taking the shortcut. And a lot of times other countries, citizens from other countries were funneling themselves through Mexico because they knew that it was a very lax border security situation. People have to understand that these cartel members, these gangs, and honestly, just regular people who were coming across the border who had very ill intentions, they were killing us. They were killing producers. They were killing livestock. We actually had to implement a bill here in Texas that protected farmers and ranchers, because what these people were doing was cutting fence lines, letting cattle out so they can cross over pasture lands. And when you cut that fence line, those cattle or whatever, animal that you have in that area can get out. And when you're driving a car at night and there's a black cow on the road, there's a lot of people who die, innocent civilians who are from urban areas or even rural areas, that they're dying because they're hitting these animals at night. And the problem is in the past, these producers were being held responsible, but you go and check their pastures, their fence lines are being cut. And then when that happens at 2, 3, 1 o'clock, whatever in the morning, the manpower to investigate every single fence line on every single property, every cross fence, perimeter fence of every single operation on a daily basis, you would not be able to get it done in a day, much less done in a reasonable time frame where you can actually get the rest of your work done. And so we actually had to implement some laws to protect these producers. People were suing them. Mm-hmm. Insurance. People don't understand this either. If your animals get out multiple times and over a certain amount of time, and it is your animals are consistently getting out and it's causing damages, you will lose your insurance. Mm-hmm. And that is a massive issue. We had people who were coming into funneling drugs into our school systems. And again, this is not just a southern border issue. There was a producer I was working with, and his kids go to a school in the Oklahoma, Texas state line area. They had a massive cartel problem. These kids, these middle schoolers, were being told to take drugs to their school. And so I know a lot of people are worried about some of the employment sides of things, but my perspective of it is my family, actually 2 of my family members just got legalized citizens, one from Germany, one from Colombia, in the last 2 weeks, back to back. My aunt from Venezuela, she's also a legal citizen. They took the time to become legal here in the United States. Just like if I were to go to other countries and be a citizen there, or to go over there and work there, you have to go through a legal process. And people don't understand, if you are in maybe some urban areas across the United States. I think I thought it was hilarious. Greg Abbott decided to ship off the ones that we could capture up to New York. It's like, fine, you think this is funny? You think this is a joke? Fine, take them. And then they realize the infrastructure, the money, the resources it takes to accommodate for these people. The mayor of New York City put a state of emergency. They're like, we can't handle these people. Well, no crap, neither can we. And these people are killing livestock. They're killing horses. They're killing people. There was a rancher down in South Texas that got shot the other day just because he saw them drive down a road, and because he saw their faces, boom, right there. So it's not a joke. It needs to be taken seriously. And again, I'm very excited that we're finally taking our southern border seriously, because this was a state of emergency that's been happening over the last 4 years.
I think anybody in the horse industry who has friends in that area, and some have seen posts on our social media, like riding out, just trying to go check on their cattle and running into these people, and you don't know what they're, carrying with them, or if they're going to kill you too. So yeah, massive issue. But are there any new proposals that are beneficial for farmers, that farmers are really excited about, to not only stay in the industry, because a lot have been getting out? They're like, forget this. If I have a whole administration that's going to be against me, I'm not going to keep fighting for this. But now they're finally getting to see, okay, maybe I can withstand this.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the first thing is finding a lot of so people have to also understand that there's a lot of fraud going in within our government. Go figure, right? Like, government fraud. Who would have thought that? But there was also going on with the USDA and the FDA. And so there was a lot of programs where you have a blanket term or a blanket bill, but there's a lot of little things slipped in there in order to get it passed. And so my hat's off again for discovery of a lot of these misappropriation of funds, and a lot of these research or grant programs that were being not very beneficial towards agriculture, and it was being reassessed to more climate control issues or environmental issues that were just so way off base. And so the problem is like, we'll take the Farm Bill, for example. This is a very large bill monetary wise, but less than, what is it, like 0.5% actually, if the entire bill actually goes towards producers directly. And so I know that the USDA went ahead and made a lot of cutbacks. Again, Brooke Rollins even came out and said, look, we got to figure out where we're leaking money at before we can actually start utilizing funds productively. So I, again, really urge the everyday consumer and producer just to be patient. That's not an easy thing. There's a reason why it's been leaking for a long time. But we did hear that they released a $1 billion plan to help combat the avian influenza issue that we have here in the United States. And that's also going to help with egg prices. Egg prices has been something that people have really noticed. And I think that's a really good demonstration, too, for people to understand how volatile your food supply is. And one bad disease comes in, you're going to be feeling it at the counter. Producers are going to be feeling it. And so this money is going to be help going towards not only diagnostics, but also disease prevention and some research, but also to help bring egg prices down. And I think that's really going to help the American producer and consumers see that this is a chain link event. Hoof and mouth disease. Germany has lost their title as a no vaccine required hoof and mouth disease country by the World Animal Health Organization, and that's massive, meaning that is very hard to treat because it's so rapidly and so easily spreadable. But if that got brought here to the United States, we would have a standstill of livestock transportation. And so that, you think beef prices are high right now. Well, beef prices are only high because our supply is short. You talk about the complete national standstill of livestock transportation. that's not a ripple effect. That's a tsunami. And so I think that we needed that dose of reality. I really think for people to remember that their food doesn't come from a grocery store. It comes from producers, that it gets transported to grocery stores. So first of all, we've got that going forward, which I think is going to be great. There's also the Emergency Commodity Assistance Program that's being put in place. That's a $10 billion program. And those are direct payments to producers. Again, the Farm Bill is not, for livestock producers, it's not the best payouts, really. And whether you are for or pro or against commodity subsidies, the problem is that this was, I think, first and originally supposed to be a very beneficial program, and over time it has become more of a dependency versus become a wall to lean on versus a cane to help walk. And so now it's so integrated into our economics that if you were to undo that, it would be a massive change. And I don't think that that's something that can happen, not easily. If it can, it would be a complete reconstruction of our economy. And I don't think that the United States is in the agricultural asset-wise position to create such a change. So having that ECAP will really help producers see that money come through. And then there's also a climate smart budget that's coming through, the $7.7 billion deal. That is more of adopting climate smart practices. And I hate that word, climate smart, but again, you kind of have to have that feel good verbiage. That's through the NRCS. And there's a lot of different programs within NRCS, whether it's fence building, cross fence building, et cetera, that producers now can see. They've always had access to the NRCS, but now they've had a little additional budget added in. And so, there's a lot of uncertainty, but when is there not? It's always one thing or another. And so if you are wanting to get in agriculture production, or if you're in agriculture production, everyone says, oh, it's like the doomsday type of informational deliverance, but that's also what gains views and your attention. So let's look at all the facts. Let's look at that beef is still a number one commodity here in the United States. It is one of the most demanded beef product in the world is the United States. It's the safest. It's the most sustainable. Our pork exports are great. Chicken exports, even with our shortage of numbers, it's still doing great. And consumers are finally wanting to understand where their food comes from. So if you are a small time farmer and rancher, which is over 98% of farms and ranches across the United States, people are finally giving a crap about where their food comes from. So this is your chance to not only share your story, but also to grow your operation and really get back and get involved with your community, and your community will in turn get involved with you.
You brought up two really good points about how delicate the system is and how far behind we can get with just one little problem. Now, you posted a video that was just so great about the environmentalists, which you also just brought up, and reintroducing wolves into Colorado, and how it's kind of backfiring on them right now.
Figure, yeah.
Explain.
Oh, yes. So I feel like we're always battling something between the EPA or environmentalists or animal rights activists. So the gray wolf was getting to the point where they were being considered endangered, and the idea was to reintroduce gray wolves into a region who had almost completely eradicated the gray wolf. Sounds great, right? Like, oh my gosh, let's go. Wildlife, they're pretty, very National Geographic vibes. And the problem with that is that these animals are carnivores. These animals are predators. Predators kill. And the problem that you have is these animals are being reintroduced into areas that are heavily dense cattle operations. And the thing about this is it sounds nice. It makes you feel good. But the reality is that you might as well be aiming a gun at a producer's head at that point. These animals are completely ruining our cattle systems. They are attacking calves. Again, remember, we're at a shortage of cattle. And Colorado has, typically very, aggressive winters compared to some southern states. So you already are battling a lot of natural occurring weather, climate, topography issues. Now you're introducing wolves. And the wolf thing is they kill calves typically. Calves are easy targets, they're easy to get. And the problem with that is people I've seen in the comments go, well, you can get livestock guardian dogs, blah, blah, blah. That's typically guardian dogs are more along the lines with your smaller domesticated ruminants like your sheep, goats, things like that. Cattle and dogs typically don't go well together. Very few times have I seen people incorporate livestock guardian dogs in with cattle. Again, it's more towards your smaller ruminants. Sometimes you'll see some alpaca thrown in there. Alpaca can be, or llamas can be pretty mean, or donkeys. A lot of the times you're going to see donkeys. For whatever reason, that's just how they are, because you have to remember, these cattle recognize a dog and they think that it's a predator to attack them or their babies. And introducing a guardian dog may not help with their temperament on being able to protect themselves. These gray wolves are coming after, and the thing that the state said was like, oh, well, they surely won't kill that many. We'll just set up a fund, a little piggy bank that we can write a check out of. And as long as it's a legitimate kill from a wolf, then it'll be fine. The problem is these wolves are coming up to people, up to cattle that are within several yards of producers, to the point where I read a story that this guy said, I could have saved 3 calves if it was not even 4 pickup lengths away from me. And I called it in. I said, it is a GPS collared dog. Can I shoot it? And they said, if you shoot that gray wolf with the GPS collar, you will go to federal prison. You will be a felony. You will be put behind bars. And he had to watch these animals kill his investment. People also don't understand, you can't just breed a cow, have a baby, a year later pop out another calf. It takes on average 3 years for a female to reinvest in that herd, meaning for her to get pregnant and actually start having a calf. That's 3 years. And people wonder why that our cattle numbers are so low, is because it takes years to rebuild this. And especially right now where the cattle market is so high, that's a lot of money that you're losing. So you can't protect your livestock. You can't call it in and ask for help. They literally say, oh, well, very much Yellowstone wise, if you shoot it, it tracks and it will send an alert. And they can easily track it back to wherever that animal first had abnormal movement, etc. And so now the state's saying, oh, well, we're kind of running out of money. You think? Because what are they going to do? Go the extra length and the extra yards to go hunt down their quote unquote typical habitat type of game? Or are they just going to hit that cow that just is laying there, had a calf can't really walk yet? That's like an all-you-can-eat buffet versus having to go shoot the thing yourself. So people are forgetting that your habitat and your ecosystem is vastly different today than it was 100 years ago. The fact of the matter is it's never going to be the same as it was 100 years ago. I'm all for conservation of species. I get that. I'm not exactly, death to all exotics. That's not and that's no way in any frame what I'm trying to say. What I am saying is that you have to have a harsh reality check that Mr. Gray Wolf is going to kill your food supply and kill off rural communities if you continue to let this happen. And your quote unquote budget for damages, you're running out of money. They even said that there's no way, if we already paid this much money, there's no way we're going to be able to pay out what we predict to come in down the road. And the other thing about it is you have to have a verified kill. One producer got awarded $290,000. That's how much damages these things are doing. That's one guy. And there's a lot more than just one guy in Colorado. And the thing is, those wolves do not stay within boundaries. They don't know what fence lines are. They don't know where state lines are. They don't care. They're not the one paying state income taxes. They can hop between states as they please. So you're creating a cancer, in my opinion, that is spreading into other states. It is killing off communities. It's killing off your food supply. And it seems like a very small level now, but it's becoming a very big issue because it's going to grow if it goes unchecked. There's a reason that those animals were cut back on in population. There's a reason for that. And I don't believe that Colorado is going about this in the best way.
No, it's not like you can just have a heart trap with a wolf either. They're not, as you said, with fence lines and everything. Let's move on to the equine industry, because you're not only part of the cattle industry, you're also part of the equine industry and the Quarter Horse Association. And the Quarter Horse Association and many of the others, we just had a bill that was passed, a couple bills that were passed. I know there was one in Florida about decoupling gaming. So now the thoroughbred industry is starting to feel it and having more of a government presence at shows. When people are showing their livestock, that as many farmers do, they'll take their horses and show them also. What is your feelings as to where they were going with that, with stipulations of the new rule changes and more government insight into just simple showing?
Are you referencing the HPA?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so I actually was going to have a panel about this. I was going to have people who were in the racking and Tennessee walking horse industry, and then people who are in the quarter horse industry, people, lawyers, attorneys, veterinarians. I mean, I was planning on having a very equal and very wide level of expertise, but equal on both sides. And
because people were losing their minds over this.
It was bad. When I saw people kill off 27-plus-year-old friendships, I saw people slander. I saw people go after other people on Facebook, look up who they work for, tag their businesses in it. And if you were one of those people, shame on you. And I know I'm not going to name names, but there's a lot of people who represent some organizations who were doing exactly that. And I think not only is that petty, I think that is extremely immature and extremely unproductive. The problem you have with the equine industry is they're very emotionally driven. A lot of these animals are not ROI perspective of investments. They are more emotional investments. And there's a lot of heartstrings. Look at the movies. We've got Secretariat, Flicka, Spirit. A lot of these equine-based ownerships are very emotionally driven. But you also have to look at it is that it's just like any other industry, the sports. Let's look at the athletic industry. You have a raw talent, which a lot of these horses do have, and then you have the people who cheat their way through the system. And it's the reason for those who are cheating the system is they're the reason we have rules, regulation, testing in place. And I think that's really a shame because in athletics, you can choose to make that decision. In the performance world, whether you're doing livestock shows or you're doing horse shows, that animal is not making that decision. You're making that decision for that animal. And I think that there's a special place below this earth for you if you are implementing that kind of pain on an animal. Now, the racking horse industry and the Tennessee walking horse industry, the reason that the Horse Protection Act was originally put in place is because they were conducting this method called soring, which is completely cruel. They were burning these horses, dousing their feet in chemical, drilling nails into the bottom of their feet. It's quite gruesome. These horses are quite literally lame. It is the most disgusting thing I've ever seen on the planet. And the problem with that is when the HPA first became a bill back in the 70s is that they were using terminology and regulations of the current methods and methodology and terminology at the time. Just like anything, if you want to cheat, you were going to find a different way. And they're very creative. I wish we had government people who were pro agriculture as creative as these people are to cheat the system. Because these people are going in and they are modifying the way that they are still accomplishing the same end result, but they are doing different modifications. They're doing different kinds of chains, different chemicals that have come out, and a mixture of chemicals. So that's the whole reason that the HPA was looked at as needing a revamp and updating the terminology being used in the HPA. Here's the problem. I don't think any one of us is against stopping animal abuse and, torture, really. None of us are against that. The problem is the verbiage that the USDA and the HPA is using, and the lack of clarification that the USDA veterinarians who were in charge of answering people's questions could not answer. That's our main problem. And this wide blanket of including other disciplines that are not related to the Tennessee walking or racking horse industry or racking horse shows. In my opinion, you don't need to be having an HPA inspector looking for soaring at a cutting event, at a barrel horse event. Shoot, even at a halter event. Now, you look at maybe some exaggerated movements like your Western pleasure. Okay, I could see that argument being, I just still don't think there's much validity to it, but I could see where you're trying to stretch that line. But the reality is a lot of your other industries are very performance driven, speed driven. If you have a lame horse, you're not performing well. That's one of the first issues, is the terminology that's being used is too vague, and also the blanket coverage of other disciplines is, I think, unnecessary. That's the first thing. Second thing, the research that was done to encourage such modifications to the HPA and updates was done by the Humane Society. When has the Humane Society ever been pro-agriculture? When has the Humane Society ever been pro-stock shows? In fact, I vividly remember in high school when I was showing at the Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo, them standing across the street with picket signs dressed up as pigs and cows and smearing tomato juice all over themselves. So I have a problem supporting something that the main driver has been from the Humane Society, just because of the bias that we have experienced in the agriculture community from such activist groups. With that being said, I also have an issue, and I think a lot of us have a concern with governmental involvement, because the HPA so far has been fairly self-regulating. And that was one of the things that they wanted to address with the updates to the HPA, is going in and saying, hey, like, you are self-regulating. That's like if you have someone who's on probation for a drug problem and you come and knocking, and once a year they come to your office and say, this is the amount of people that we have been in contact with for drugs, and saying, oh, you're clean. Okay, cool. Thanks. I could see that there's a conflict of interest, and there was a lot of very relaxed inspections going on before these shows. I get that. I don't disagree that that's a concern. The problem that I have is once you have a government entity get involved with something, I don't think there's, and correct me if I'm wrong, somebody please, but I don't think there's ever been a time the government's got involved and then they said, you know what, actually, JK, we don't need to be here. Y'all can have the reins back. See ya. I don't think that's ever happened. And I think that was the main concern with a lot of these, especially the Western industry was very concerned, because it starts with that. And then it goes into, well, you can't wear spurs. Well, you can't have spade bits. Well, you can't have this. We already have a lot of bit and tack regulation within each discipline anyways, and it's heavily regulated. But I think that's where a lot of the fear. Now, what I will say is that there's a lot of people who are misspeaking and giving half-truths to get an emotional response out of people. And that's where my issue with a lot of it came from. There's a lot of groups, pro and anti horse industry. There's one in particular that they were using this to help gain memberships, and they are not a 501c3, meaning that your money they could use however they wanted. Legally, a 501c3 cannot get involved with political lobbyists. And so, therefore, this particular group was not, they're not a nonprofit. And the person who runs this has already shut down the former version of this before, due to behavioral and personal involvement issues. And so when you start utilizing people's fear to monetize, that's where I really I get, a burr under my saddle on that number. I don't think that anybody really had a direct issue with, again, the welfare concern. The main concern was government overreach into other disciplines and the vagueness that would allow such doors to be opened.
Let's move to lab meat. It's a huge topic, and people have so many questions about it. And I know right now, especially in the UK, they have a lot of questions because it's being snuck into certain things without anybody's consent. We talked about it before, but go again with the overview of what exactly is lab meat and how is it different from natural meat from animals?
There is nothing natural about lab meat. Let's just put it that way. The way that you need to understand, if you don't really know the process of lab or fake meat, the way it works is they first have to collect stem cells from an animal. So it defeats the purpose of fake meat anyways. If you already have the entire basis around the production of fake meat is through an animal stem cell. So I, digress right there. But the way that works is you get cell collection, then you do cell cultivation, which means this cultivation happens in a bioreactor. That is the official term, a bioreactor. Again, sounds super healthy and natural to me. They are fed amino acids, proteins, different kind of carbohydrates, etc. And then they let that tissue form. So that tissue formation happens, and it takes quite a while for that to happen. And then once that does occur, they harvest that cell culture, and then they cut it to what people would expect their meat to look like, and then do dyes and colors to make sure that color-wise it's as similar as they possibly can get it. So again, nothing natural about that. If you look at the ingredient list, my beef says beef. Fake meat has a laundry list of ingredients, all ending in like oxides. And so for me, I'm not ever willing to purchase such product. The problem that we were seeing is that, again, we were trying, to your point, a lot of this is being kind of snuck in to consumers, and a lot of consumers are being really misled. There's a lot of pretty labels out there, and people tend to buy the pretty labels versus the plain Jane, very minimalistic beef, chicken, and what cut you're buying and what grade it is. So the United States did pass where you legally now are required to put this is a lab-based product, or indicating this is not a naturally occurring product. The problem with that is I could be, again, wrong on this, but to my knowledge, there's no size requirement on such font. And as we like to know, is that a lot of things can get slipped into labels through the fine print. And so that would be my number one concern when shopping at any store, especially a store that you are unfamiliar with if you're traveling or trying out a place for the first time, is looking at what you're buying and actually taking the time to understand what you're buying. If you use, I think a lot of people have issues with the Instacart type of services, and a lot of the times the people who are selecting that product may not be as educated or really concerned, to be honest with you. Their objective is to get that cart filled as fast as they can, and then you come in and pick it up. And so that's one thing that is also part of your responsibility. If you're paying for a product, you should know what you're buying. Again, I always propose the idea of shopping local, or using a local butcher shop. It might be a little more expensive, but you're not only reinforcing the economy for small-owned businesses, but you're also pushing for your local producers as well. So that's the number one thing. Restaurants, that is where a lot of concern, I think, is happening. But here in the United States, we have a lot of regulations that restaurants have to abide by. And again, that's where I will die on that hill that the United States is the safest and the most sustainable food production system in the entire world, is because of your example right there, is that other countries have to worry about that. Unfortunately, that is not something that you can really change if you live in another country. I think the best thing you can do is ask your service and your wait staff. If that is a concern that you have, then I would ask, where is this? Like, what is this? This is, is this actual real like used to cluck cluck and now is on my plate type of chicken, or is this something, and I think we see most common in chicken, but or like, where are you sourcing your food from? That question should be easily answered no matter where you go. And if it's not easily answered, that's when you should maybe reevaluate where you're dining.
What about the plant-based alternative?
Yes, if it is not from an animal, I do not eat it. That's not an accurate statement. If it is based as a protein source and meat, if it is not from an animal, then yeah, I don't do the plant-based meat either. Again, these things, a lot of, actually, funny story, insects are now being allowed as not only food dyes, but as added extra protein sources. They've cleverly renamed it in several different ways. So if you look through that ingredient list, if you are eating meat and there's more than meat, or like if you're eating beef and it says more than just beef, or chicken's a little different because you have to use a little water with chicken for packaging purposes. But if there's more than one or two ingredients, I'm out. You're trying to market this as a healthier alternative, or a healthy food source or alternative, and it's got 10, 15, 20 ingredients. Absolutely not. There's a reason that plant-based meat is still sinking in stock price. Bill Gates is trying his butt off to try to salvage that. A lot of different companies are trying their butts off. They're paying these quote unquote health influencers. They're doing marketing. They're trying everything they possibly can to try to stay alive, because they are actively trying to put agriculture out of business. And I refuse to eat it. I won't do it. If it's I'd rather starve than eat that stuff, because again, you don't know what the long-term effects of those ingredients are going to be on your body, especially if that is something you put in consecutively into your diet. If you eat it once, yeah, you're not going to die. I can guarantee you that. But I know, as someone who cooks all of their own meals, who I actually package my own meals now that I'm on the road again a lot more, and I'll bring my own food with me. Very little do I eat out. I know exactly what goes into that food. And there is a huge taste difference. And the health, you cannot replicate God's creation. The amount of health and vitamins, the things that you get out of food, like true food, beef, chicken, especially beef, you can't get that anywhere else, and your body will respond to it. And I think that's what we see a lot of people getting sick right now, is that they are using these quote unquote plant-based this, plant-based that. And I think that your body is crying. It's begging you to put nutrients into yourself, but instead you're sipping on your iced coffee and your soy latte. I saw this deal where I said, I didn't realize oat milk was so bad for you. Yeah, the dairy industry screaming that for ever, but y'all were listening to the propaganda. You were listening to the influencers, the pretty labels, the feel good stuff, and a lot of fake information. And again, half truths being spoken. And you think that, oh, this is a healthier alternative. If it has the word alternative, it's probably not healthier for you. Look at margarine versus butter. I mean, need I say more?
We just had Robert F. Kennedy sworn in as the head of Health and Human Services, with a huge focus on the food industry and the pharmaceutical industry, which also affects the agricultural industry and livestock industry. What are you seeing coming down the pipeline from all of that and his new persona that he is, where he can make decisions? Because he's a lawyer. He's got a background in all of these lawsuits that have come down from all these different industries.
Yeah, RFK is kind of a mixed pot. I have absolutely no issue with what he's trying to deal with the pharmaceuticals. I think that they are the original cancer source of a lot of our health issues here in the United States, because the fact of the matter is you can't sell product if you don't have sick people. And the best way to get people sick is to start getting them sick at a young age. And the reason that you're trying to get them sick at a young age is because they'll be a lifelong customer. And the best way to do that is something that they have to do every single day, which is eat. Formula, kids snacks. There's a reason they use so much different food colors and additives in kids snacks to make it look pretty, and colorful packaging. And again, it's all marketing. I will say that the pharmaceutical company is fantastic when it comes to marketing. 100% fantastic. A lot of the manufactured and your packaged food, processed food is really where a lot of your issues should be when it comes to your food production. Again, United States, we are super healthy when it comes to our food production and quality of food. Where we start losing that quality of food is your packaged food products, so your manufactured products. Those are when we start seeing a lot of your preservatives come in and food dyes. I know they did red dye 3. Yeah, whoopty freaking do. There's not a lot of stuff that really uses red dye 3. It's the red dye 40. And until they ban red dye 40, that's right there is a really good example of something that's not naturally occurring. Again, they use a lot of dyes and food colorings to make food look more attractive to people. It's like a banana. When a banana that's ripe, it's perfect, she's bright, she's yellow, she's pretty, and they use those for commercials. But you leave a banana out for 10 minutes and it turns brown. Still the same banana, still nutritious, but because it doesn't have that bright, what you think Crayola color to it, people automatically think it's not healthy or good for you. The fact of the matter is food comes in various shades. And with RFK, I think that what he's wanting to do with the whole MAHA, Make America Healthy Again, I don't necessarily have a problem with that. I think where a lot of people are concerned is his outlook on agriculture and production agriculture. To my knowledge, they are not going to really let him dip his toe too heavily into that field. From my knowledge and understanding, he is kind of kept in the pharmaceutical processed food health lane. I'm okay with that. I really would like to see him not involved in the production food arena because I think there's a lot of management practices when it comes to pesticides, herbicides that he is not really fully understanding. And the fact of the matter is the world can't run off organics. It's very insufficient. It does not, the yields are terrible. And really it's the lowest on the totem pole when it comes to sustainability. It's not going to feed the world. And so we got to make sure that, yes, we're being good stewards of God's land, but also that we are still feeding ourselves as well. And so, again, a lot of people are really getting more interested into their food production. They used to be very heavy on the convenience, which is where these companies and, fast food, that's really where they got their power from, as they were trying to service people's lack of time. So they were saying, hey, like if you want convenience, and it's cheap. Well, the reason it's cheap is because they're not using the top tier products. And as time has gone on, more women are out of the household, dual income households. They have got kids that go to school. They're not homeschooled. They're eating out versus cooking in because it takes time. I get that. But people were sacrificing quality for convenience. Now that pendulum is finally starting to swing where people are actually caring about their food and how it's made, where it's grown, and the quality of it. But they're being easily swayed again by marketing. If you see something that says like GMO-free orange juice, well, no crap. There's no such thing as GMO orange. There's a lot of miseducation and misunderstandings within the consumer world, and it's being advertised as this healthier version of things, especially the word organic and GMO free and antibiotic free. But the fact of the matter is everything you buy at the grocery store, if it is a real food item, meaning a commodity ingredient, it is healthy for you. There's a lot of regulations and inspections that go on to make sure that your meat, your fruits, your vegetables are good for you. The only main problem I have with your retail locations is that they will turn away things that don't look pretty and aren't uniform. Because again, consumers will actively go out of their way to not buy things that they are not familiar with. We're creatures of habit. So that's the one thing I would really encourage people. If you want to do a home garden or if you want to do a farmer's market, great. But just know that some of these fruits and vegetables, they get stuck between limbs at a tree and they might look a little funny, or that bell pepper might be, a little misshapen on one side. It doesn't necessarily affect the quality. It's just different from what you are used to seeing.
With that, the Meghan Markle cooking show that does all of that with all the natural ingredients. Do you think that will help more people getting out there to find out where their food is from, where the fruits and vegetables come from, and even, like you said, try growing it?
Yeah, again, I think people are, I've never watched that show, but I think people are really starting to get interested in where their food's coming from. And I think that and people in agriculture really need to put their faces behind their food too. I'll give a huge shout out, Apple Girl Kate Thornton out of Washington. She's very well known on social media for their apple and pear orchards. And she's got her face on the side of a semi. Like, who she is, it's where she's at and what she does. And I think that kind of activism is what we need. People who are willing to share their stories, people who are willing to take the time to educate. And social media is a great way to do it. Social media, a lot of your urban consumers are on social media. And so use that leverage. Use that leverage. Somebody has to, and it might as well be you, because if we don't, as Tucker Brown likes to say, if we don't share our story, somebody else will. And I think that in this world full of miscommunication, misinformation, and really just gaslighting, we should be the gate getters, not the gatekeepers of your food supply. But when it comes to your consumers' interest, people are starting to actually want to know. It's just really our calling to set the truth straight. And just because someone's interested in their food, let's get them educated about their food, not just the feel goods for a marketing ploy.
With that, what do we see coming for with you? I mean, you've taken on this new role, and you're still hopefully going to be advocating a lot more with people and their food and where it's coming from, and especially the cattle industry and people understanding more about it, with the animals, as you said, chickens and cattle and pork, and where all of this comes from and how it's actually processed, and the people who are doing it behind it. So maybe they could be a little more empathetic both ways.
Yeah, I'm excited. Again, I just go wherever God tells me to go, but we have a lot of things in the works. On my business side, if for those who are not familiar, it's W Ranch Advocacy. We have a website now. Very exciting. There's an education portal. So if you hear about a term or a topic that you want to learn more about, it has very science-based, science data-driven information that we are trying to remove as much human bias as possible. So that way you can look at the data and you can decide for yourself, or maybe you can correct maybe somebody or something that you maybe didn't really understand before. One of the things that we're doing is we're, again, very on the ground, grassroots type of operation. So if you're not already, like and subscribe. We're on Apple Podcasts and Spotify as The Bridge. And then on social media, we're W Ranch Advocacy. We have a Facebook, a YouTube, and Instagram and TikTok accounts. The YouTube accounts is where our visual aids are going to be coming in. So what we're doing is we're going out in the field with different producers. And my job is to ask them questions on their management practices, why they're doing what they're doing, how they're growing their food, and allow them to share why and what their objectives are and what that should entail and customers and people and viewers to see is, hey, these are people who honestly believe in what they're doing. Let me understand what goes into grass-finished beef versus conventional beef. And allow that window into true agriculture production. So it allows people to actually see and get a quote unquote virtual farm tour of these places, not just in Texas, not just in Oklahoma, but across the nation and eventually international. And my goal is for people to not only see how their food is grown, see the faces behind it, but then also there's an interactive map that if you want to purchase that product or service, we allow that avenue of communication. So you can contact that producer directly, and you can follow them on social media or however they best communicate with their services. It allows not only consumers, but also producers saying, hey, I want to buy that bull. I like what they have to say. I like what they stand for. I like what they're doing. Or hey, I'm really interested in maybe partnering up with them on something. Whatever the case is, it allows that avenue. And so very much dirty job style, Mike Rowe, like in the field, doing the stuff with them, showing people that I'll be the guinea pig. I'll make a fool out of myself because I know a lot of the things that people are doing are a lot more difficult than it seems, a lot more technical and a lot more scientific. And I'm hoping that not only people understand more about their food production, but what all goes into food production. It's not just farmers and ranchers. It is transportation, it's research, it's technology, it is genomics, it is shipping. So also showcasing people the different career opportunities or just the different hands that go into the food you see on your shelves. Because it's more than just what comes out of the ground or what comes out of the feedlot. It is quite literally an army of people that are involved with your food production. And I want to highlight that. And there's so many cool things and little tidbits that I'm learning along the way that I want to share that with people. So I, again, really highly encourage people to follow that. Eventually, once we get enough funding, would love to take this international and go back and travel international and show what other countries are doing. And so you can see management practices maybe you want to bring back into your own operation. So that's probably our biggest little mountain that we're trying to climb. If you are a business or a company and you want to be involved with the bridging the gap is where the name came from. We're trying to bridge urban and rural communities together. If you want to get involved, there is an interest link on my website, and we are open to seeing what kind of partnerships and developments we can do. So we can get your name out there and ours as well.
That is totally awesome. Do you think we'll see Emma Coffman in politics anytime in the future, maybe?
Maybe. That's not something I'm actively pursuing, but if Daddy Trump wants to call me up, I will answer and I'll be. So I think that you have to be involved in politics in some kind of way to make relevant change. These are the decision makers of our country. It's our job to advocate and tell these people why we need them to do what we need them to do. Or stop what we need them to stop. And so I'm never opposed to it. I would like to get out to DC sometime this year and maybe have some conversations. But so far I haven't been invited. But if you want me to come, I'll come and see what kind of maybe what we can accomplish in promoting our agriculture productions here in the United States.
All right. So people can find you on social media. The YouTube channel is called The Bridge.
YouTube, there's a podcast called on there. The actual name is W Ranch Advocacy.
Okay. So we were going to link everything in here. So Double E, I have your Instagram, Facebook. We'll get all that out there. And as you said, if you're a business, you can get involved with what you're doing also and with the actual procedures, which is really cool. This sounds like amazing. Emma, thanks for answering so many questions because people had so many questions about everything that's going on right now. And I thank you so much for taking over an hour right now to be able to talk about everything we've talked about.
Of course. Thank you again for having me again. I'm super excited to be here. And yeah, I'm very thankful you asked me to be on again.
Awesome. I am Tatiana Ryan. This is the Businessy Podcast, and this was Emma Coffman from Double E Ranch.